Hello, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle producer in the United States of America. Well, the Mandatory Beef Checkoff commissioned a new study reportedly to prevent Congress from taking action to limit beef imports. Now, the new trade study is a mindbender. It draws conclusions with incomplete data. It contains fundamental errors, and it relies on an economic model the authors themselves admit was not designed to model their inputs. The model was intended to assess marketplace changes of only 1%. Yet the authors inputted hypothetical changes that are tenfold and 100-fold greater than what the model was intended for. Even the authors admit they don't have full confidence in their loss estimates due to their overloading of the model. But that didn't stop them from concluding the sky would fall if imports or exports were reduced. And they specifically warn of catastrophic outcomes, which is overly dramatic for economic professionals not fully confident in their own modeling. So let's take a look at a few more of the study's substantial deficiencies. First, the study contains fatal errors. It contains, for example, a claim that total fed cattle sales generated over $61 billion in 2021, and they based that on the slaughter of nearly 34 million head of fed cattle. But the U.S. didn't slaughter that many fed cattle. That number is for all cattle, including cows, dairy cows, and bulls. We slaughtered only about 25 million head of fed cattle. Nevertheless, the study uses this inflated number to validate its claim of catastrophic consequences for cattle producers. And here's a funny one. Although it reveals how out of touch this study is to the real world, to capture the interaction between beef and other proteins, the authors inputted into their inappropriate model 3 pork marketing chain sectors: retail, wholesale, and fed cattle. Now, call me unsophisticated, but I did not know fed cattle were a part of the pork marketing chain. Now, second, the authors conclude that cow-calf producers, backgrounders, and stockers would lose over $10 billion if imports and exports were reduced, and over $100 billion if they were curtailed. While arriving at these losses, the authors do admit that curtailing imports would increase cull cow prices by 9%. But they purposely ignore a major source of beef imports. They ignore the approximately 2 million head of fed cattle imported each year that compete head-to-head with cow-calf producers selling lighter feeder calves and backgrounders and stockers selling heavier calves to feedlots. Now, the U.S. Department of Agriculture knows you cannot assess the impacts of trade without including imported beef that arrives in the form of live cattle. These imports constitute over 1/3 of all imported beef supplies. The USDA revealed a decade ago that roughly 18% of U.S. beef supplies were derived from either imported beef or beef from imported cattle. But the Checkoff study claims that over the past several decades, the volume of imports in the domestic market rarely exceeded much over 13%. And third, the Checkoff study parrots the beef industry's claim that upwards of $400 of the value of fed cattle is attributable to exports. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association specifically stated that exports add this value to every cow and steer sold. But here's a test that invalidates this claim. If it's true that you can determine how much value exports add to each fed animal by dividing the value of exports by the total number of fed cattle, then it must also be true that you can determine how much value domestic beef sales add to each fed animal by dividing the value of domestic beef sales by the same number of fed cattle. And if you make this calculation, domestic beef sales will add over $5,000 to each fed animal, which is remarkable since fed cattle averaged less than $2,000 in 2021. Domestic sales do not add $5,000 to each fed animal, nor did export sales add $400. So why is the study wrong? Well, it's simple. The value of beef, whether sold domestically or exported, is no longer connected to the value of cattle. The economists are comparing apples to oranges, a fundamental mistake. Now, fourth, the study claims we export products that have more value in foreign markets, including products like tongues and livers that we don't consume much of here, and we import products found cheaper abroad. Now, if that's true, then why did we import over 461 million pounds of tongues, livers, and offal over the past 5 years? You think that puts money in the hands of cattle producers? Of course not. Yes, trade is important to the U.S. cattle industry, but let's discuss trade policies using facts so we can maximize the benefits of trade while minimizing the harms associated with rising imports. We simply can't do that with this fatally flawed beef checkoff trade study. So help us get trade policy right. Go to our website at www.r-calfusa.com to join with us. With that, have a productive week. Thank you and goodbye.